They say the drawings were nothing more than a child's imagination, crude sketches done in charcoal and ink. But every historian who's examined them agrees. The places on those maps didn't exist on any record from 1817. And yet, each child drew the same thing, a town that no adult could ever find. In the autumn of 1817, Oregon was still a wild frontier. Dense pine forests, heavy mists from the coast, and towns that barely held more than a few dozen settlers. On the edge of what is now Marion County stood a small stone building, the St. Hildegard's Orphanage. Its name rarely appears in modern records, except in fragments of church registries and a few archived letters stored at the Oregon Historical Society in Portland. The orphanage was run by Sister Agnes Leclerc, a French nun who'd come west with missionaries in 1814. Contemporary accounts describe her as kind, strict, and unyielding in matters of faith. The children, 17 in total, were mostly orphans of illness or mining accidents. Life there was simple: morning prayers, lessons, chores, and sleep by candlelight. But in late October of that year, something began to change. October 19th, 1817A, local farmer, Daniel Reeve, noted in his journal that the little ones of the stone orphanage had begun their drawing lessons again, though they do it with great fervor. Too much. Perhaps. At first, Sister Agnes encouraged it. Art was a calm distraction from hunger and the cold. But what caught her attention was the consistency. Each child, without guidance, began sketching maps. The lines were delicate, almost mathematical, leading to what appeared to be a clearing near a river bend, a place with no recorded name. The drawings grew more elaborate. Little roads, marks for trees, and finally, a small building, always drawn at the same angle, always with a black doorway. When asked what they were drawing, most of the children answered the same: it's where the light hums. The only surviving adult record from that period comes from a traveling priest, Father Wilkes, who stayed overnight at St. Hildegard's on October 24th, 1817. His diary, preserved in the Archdiocese of Portland, contains this entry. The children's behavior is unnerving. Their voices low, their gazes fixed on the eastern hills. They sketch even during meals. One girl, Mary, told me, "It's not drawing, Father. It's remembering." By the end of that month, Sister Agnes stopped the lessons entirely. She burned some of the drawings, but others, too many to destroy, she locked away in her private desk. One of the older boys, Samuel Grant, reportedly told a farmhand that the maps were meant to show them back. When the man asked, "Back where?" the boy only smiled and whispered, "Home." That evening, Samuel vanished. November 2nd, 1817. A storm rolled through the valley. Sister Agnes and the remaining children huddled in the chapel as thunder cracked over the pines. When the wind died down, she discovered something carved into the wood near the altar. Small lines intersecting, forming the same familiar pattern. A map, and below it, written in a shaky hand, "It's open again." When researchers from the University of Oregon's Anthropology Department visited the site in 1992, they found remnants of the orphanage's foundation. Among the artifacts uncovered was a thin metal tin, corroded but sealed. Inside were 3 preserved pages, believed to be among the children's original drawings. Each contained detailed map-like sketches that, when overlaid, pointed to coordinates just outside present-day Silverton. No trace of any structure or settlement was found there. Experts remain divided. Some claim it's evidence of early frontier mapping, others something far stranger. The interview, 93 historian, Dr. Elaine Porter. Every map matches the same location, a valley that didn't appear on any known survey until the 1900s. That's over 80 years later. Interviewer: could it have been a coincidence? Dr. Porter: children aged 6 to 12 drawing identical topography with correct river placement? No, something was guiding them. Whether it was collective memory or something else, I don't know. That same week, after Samuel's disappearance, Sister Agnes reportedly began hearing footsteps in the hallways after lights out. The building had only 2 oil lamps, and yet shadows stretched along the walls like figures pacing outside her room. In one surviving letter to the parish, dated November 5th, 1817, she wrote, "The children wake at the same hour, whispering toward the door. They say he's there, They call him the cartographer. The name appears several times across later accounts. No adult ever claimed to see him. On November 7, 1817, Sister Agnes entered the dormitory before dawn and found 4 beds empty. No signs of struggle, no footprints leading outside in the frost, only charcoal markings smeared across the floorboards, circular, unfinished, like compass rings. By mid-morning, a search party was organized by locals. They combed the nearby woods but found nothing. One volunteer later told a parish witness that his lantern flickered when he neared a dry creek bed. And in that moment of darkness, he swore he heard children singing. To this day, no records of those missing children were ever found, and Sister Agnes's final correspondence, dated November 10th, ends abruptly mid-sentence. If they return to finish the maps, I fear, the paper ends there. When construction crews expanded a hiking trail near Silverton in 2014, one worker reported finding something buried under a pine stump, a small wooden box sealed with wax. Inside were brittle papers, drawings, maps, each signed with initials of the lost children. The lines, faded and shaking, showed the same place, a clearing by a river bend, marked with 3 words in charcoal. We're still here. By the winter of 1817, 4 children from St. Hildegard's had vanished without trace. Official reports from the Marion parish listed them as presumed lost to wilderness exposure. But handwritten margins in the surviving register suggest something else, that their disappearances were connected to the maps. December 3rd, 1817. The orphanage stood half buried in snow. Sister Agnes kept the remaining children inside, forbidding drawing, reading, or even idle talk after sunset. Yet the compulsion returned. At night, she'd find scraps of parchment torn from hymnals, tiny sketches of the same winding paths. One child, Eleanor Byrne, age 9, claimed she still heard Samuel's voice. "He says we're almost done," she whispered during morning prayer. "Done with what?" Sister Agnes asked. "With remembering," Eleanor said. The nun struck the table, demanding silence, but her hands shook as she hid the child's paper beneath her sleeve. Dr. Elaine Porter, University of Oregon Historical Society interview, 1994. When we analyzed the paper fibers from those hymn scraps, we found identical mineral content to the ones later unearthed in 2014. Same ink composition, same pressure pattern. It means the drawings found under the pine stump were made inside that orphanage during that winter, December 9th, 1817. Reports from a neighboring homestead mention lights flickering beyond the ridge. Daniel Reeve, the farmer whose journal survives, described hearing what he thought was singing carried over the snow. "Not hymns," he wrote. "Something slower, like counting." When he visited the orphanage 2 days later, he found the chapel door open and Sister Agnes asleep at the altar. Around her were 13 candles burned down to pools of wax, yet she claimed she'd only lit one. From later witness notes by Father Wilkes, who returned briefly that month. The children speak of a man who teaches them from the walls, the cartographer. They say he scratches maps inside their heads when they dream. Agnes pleads for exorcism, but her letters to the diocese never arrive. The courier, a boy named Collins, vanished on the parish road. January 1818. Temperature records from the Oregon frontier that winter show a severe freeze, the kind that silenced rivers. The orphanage chimney collapsed under snow. Father Wilkes reached the building on January 18th after a 2-day ride. He found only 5 children alive, huddled near the chapel stove. Their first words, according to his recovered notes, "He's gone back to draw the door." On the chapel wall behind them was a charcoal circle, 7 feet across, marked with coordinates no one in 1818 could have known, 44.944 degree N. The exact site of the later excavation. Father Wilkes sealed the chapel and sent the surviving children to another mission east of Salem. St. Hildegard's was abandoned that spring. Dr. Porter, "We located baptismal names matching those 5 survivors. Each lived into adulthood, all within 50 miles of Silverton. None had children of their own. Every diary or letter we traced contained sketches of circles, river bends, and black doorways. One, a schoolteacher named Eleanor Byrne, the same girl who'd spoken of Samuel, left a note in 1889. He still whispers coordinates. 1996. Marion County resident interviewer. Locals say sometimes hikers hear children laughing near the river bend. Resident. Laughing? No, it's more like counting. Slow, 1 to 17. Then it stops. March 12, 1997. Construction foreman Gavin Moore filed a report of possible historical artifacts. Among them, a rusted oil lantern, a wooden door chain, and a tin case engraved with a cross. Inside were damp fragments of paper and a brittle cassette tape reel labeled Agnes Recording. Experts dated the label's ink to the 1950s, far later than the orphanage's existence. No-one historians now believe St. Hildegard's stood exactly where the modern Silver Creek Trail cuts through the forest. Ground-penetrating scans in 2018 revealed a rectangular void 10 feet below the surface, too even to be natural, yet untouched out of respect for local preservation laws. When the research team packed up that summer, one volunteer, a postgraduate named Kyle Redmond, stayed behind to take photographs. His phone's time-stamped images stop at 7:42 p.m. The final shot shows the half-cleared trail and, in the snow, a small charcoal circle drawn by hand. Kyle Redmond was never seen again. When search teams combed the Silver Creek Trail for missing volunteer Kyle Redmond in late 2018, they didn't expect to find evidence of a structure buried beneath the soil. But what they uncovered matched 200-year-old descriptions of St. Hildegard's orphanage, and something else the records never mentioned. At 11:15 a.m., two searchers located fragments of limestone blocks arranged in a square. Beneath them, a hollow echo, an air pocket. Excavation halted until proper permits were obtained, but Redmond's camera was found lodged between two roots. Investigators reviewed its memory card. The final photo showed a partially unearthed wooden trapdoor, reinforced with wrought iron. On its surface were symbols burned into the grain, circles intersecting lines, nearly identical to the children's map sketches from 1817. The discovery reignited public interest. Local news outlets dubbed it the cartographer's chamber. Dr. Elaine Porter. We initially thought it was a root cellar, but the wood used wasn't from that region. It matched timber imported from Quebec in the early 1800s. Someone went to great effort to hide whatever was down there. Interviewer. Did you find any sign of Kyle? Dr. Porter. Only his flashlight, still on. Battery drained. When the excavation resumed with archaeologists present, they found a narrow staircase descending 15 feet into a stone room about 4 meters across. On the far wall, a typewriter, rusted but upright, surrounded by pages fused with mold. The keys were jammed, but when one archaeologist brushed the dust away, the ribbon inside bore faint letters. Maps done. Nearby lay a diner-style coffee mug, cracked but intact, far too modern for 1817. It bore a faded logo, Silverton Diner, since 1954. Theories circulated that someone else, decades later, had discovered the site before and added to the legend. Polaroid photo, undated, 2 blurred children standing in a wooded clearing. One holds what appears to be a rolled parchment. Bible fragment, Psalm 23, underlined twice in red. Cassette tape, Part 2 reel match. Label smudged. Content identical to previous find, though this reel contained an additional 12 seconds of sound, faint footsteps, and a single whisper. The map opens from within. July 2019, Dr. Porter's. Every coordinate the children drew matches known fault lines in the Willamette Valley. When connected, they form a perfect circle around the orphanage site. I don't believe they were mapping a place. They were mapping a pattern, something beneath the earth itself. She mailed copies of her findings to the Historical Society that same week. They never arrived. Her vehicle was found parked near the Silverton trailhead, doors locked, keys still in the ignition. Inside the passenger seat sat a hand-drawn map on yellow legal paper, identical to the children's originals, signed only, for Agnes. Community accounts, 2020 interviews. Local ranger. People leave flowers there now. Some swear they hear knocking from the ground. I've heard it too. 3 taps, always at 3:17 a.m. Former excavation worker. We shouldn't have opened it. My dog won't go near the pine grove anymore. He just whines and backs away. Archival discovery, August 2020. Digital archivists scanning church microfilm found a lost correspondence from Father Wilkes, dated January 21st, 1818, 3 days after his recorded visit. It reads, "I sealed the lower room as commanded, yet the scratching persists. The floor breathes at night. God forgive me. They are drawing from the other side. The parish never acknowledged receiving it. Documentary closing sequence, present day. Footage shows drone shots over the Silverton forest, tall pines swaying. Ground sunken where the chamber lies buried again. Narrator, 2 centuries apart. The same coordinates, the same maps, the same vanishings. Some believe the children of St. Hildegarde's were victims of hysteria. Others think they uncovered something ancient, a memory written into the land itself. The camera pans to the trail sign. Someone has carved 3 words into the post, fresh and uneven, as if done with a nail, drawn from below. As the frame lingers, a faint sound rises, like pencil scratching on paper, then silence. By the time dusk fell over the orphanage that evening, the children refused to speak above a whisper. Father Merrin walked the candlelit corridors with trembling hands, the Bible pressed against his chest. The drawings had changed again, dozens of them, pinned to walls and hidden under beds, showing the same faceless figure in a tattered coat standing over the building. But tonight something was different. The figure's hand was pointing directly at the chapel door. At 8:45 p.m., Sister Agnes gathered all 21 children into the dining hall. "We'll pray together," she said firmly, though her voice shook. The wind howled through the broken window panes, flickering the oil lamps. It's only fear testing your faith, but as the children bowed their heads, a low humming filled the room, a sound like someone dragging a heavy chain across the roof. One of the boys, Samuel, whispered, "He's walking again." "Who?" Sister Agnes asked. "The man from the drawings." Father Merrin tightened his grip on the Bible. "No one is walking up there." "Stay calm." The hum grew louder, steady, rhythmic, like boots pacing above the rafters. Dust rained from the ceiling. Then came a single, deliberate knock on the dining hall door. No one moved. The knock came again, slower this time. Merrin stepped forward, candle shaking in his hand. "Who's there?" "Nothing." He slowly unlatched the chain and opened the door a crack. Cold air flooded the room. The corridor beyond was empty, except for a single drawing, nailed to the doorframe with a rusted nail. It showed the chapel burning. Sister Agnes gasped. "Who did this?" One of the older boys spoke up, his voice hollow. "It wasn't one of us, sister." "He leaves them." That night, Merrin made the children sleep in the chapel, believing the sacred space would protect them. The pews were rearranged into makeshift beds, and the candlelight threw tall, dancing shadows along the cracked walls. The old organ sat silent in the corner until, at precisely 11:07 p.m., a single note played on its own, a long, trembling E. The children sat up, staring at the instrument. The air turned heavy, colder than before. Sister Agnes whispered a prayer, clutching her rosary. "Deliver us from evil," the organ answered her. A second note, then a third. A slow, deliberate melody began to play. The same lullaby the children had drawn weeks earlier in their dream. Sketches, the one they claimed the faceless. Man had taught them. Father Merrin's candle flickered out. He lit another, his hands shaking. "Everyone, stay together." Then faintly a voice came from behind the altar, a child's voice. "Father Merrin." He turned, the blood draining from his face. Behind the altar stood a little girl, Emma, one of the missing orphans. Her skin looked pale, almost translucent, and her eyes reflected the candlelight like glass. She was holding a Polaroid drawing, soaked in what looked like black ink. "I finished it," she said softly. "What? What did you finish, child?" "The picture he wanted." She turned the paper around. It showed the orphanage, every window lit up, surrounded by flames. In the center of it all stood the faceless man. But this time he had a mouth. A wide, jagged grin. Father Merrin stumbled backward, muttering a prayer. "You're not Emma." The girl smiled. "He said you'd say that." The organ stopped. Then came the screams, from upstairs. The remaining children clung to each other as Sister Agnes ran toward the staircase, her candle barely lighting the hall. The walls were covered now, every inch of them, with the same charcoal faces, hundreds of them, each with hollow eyes. When she reached the top, she froze. The hallway was filled with drawings fluttering like paper moths in the draft, nailed in neat rows. In the center of the floor lay one of the orphans, Eli, his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. In his hand was a torn piece of parchment. It read, "Midnight. The chapel burns first." The bells began to ring outside, though no one was pulling the ropes. Downstairs, Father Marin yelled for everyone to get out, his voice drowned by the sound of dozens of papers tearing themselves from the walls and swirling through the air like ash. The candles burst one by one, plunging the orphanage into darkness. Sister Agnes screamed his name, but all she could see was the glow of the chapel candles suddenly flaring, brighter than before, as if feeding on something unseen. Outside, a thunderclap split the night. Witnesses in the nearby village later told investigators that they saw the orphanage lights blazing long after midnight, followed by a column of smoke. But when the sheriff arrived at dawn, the building was untouched. Not a single burn mark. Just dozens of drawings scattered in the wet grass. All of them showed the same thing: St. Dymphna's orphanage, with someone standing in its doorway, watching. By sunrise, the air smelled of smoke even though nothing had burned. Sheriff Daniel Pike arrived from the nearby settlement of Astoria with 3 deputies. What they found inside St. Dymphna's would later be described in the official log as evidence inconsistent, with no natural phenomena. Every wall was covered with children's drawings, layered on top of each other hundreds deep. When the men tried to peel them away, they found older drawings beneath, faded almost into the wood itself, as if pressed there by heat. Father Marin and Sister Agnes sat on the chapel steps, their faces pale and eyes hollow. The children huddled beside them, silent, refusing to look at the walls. "What happened here last night?" Pike asked. Marin's voice was a whisper. "The house painted itself." The sheriff frowned. "You're saying someone broke in?" "No," Sister Agnes said quietly. "It was them." She pointed to the drawings. Pike exchanged a look with his deputies. "We'll check every room." At 9:12 a.m., one of the deputies pried open a locked door at the far end of the hall, the old art room, abandoned after the first flood. The smell of mildew hit them immediately. But beneath it was something sharper: oil paint and decay. In the center of the room stood an easel. On it was a half-finished canvas, still wet. The painting showed the orphanage exactly as it appeared that morning, but with one horrifying difference. In the window of the chapel, a figure was visible. The faceless man. Sheriff Pike touched the frame. "Who did this?" None of the children answered. Sister Agnes whispered, "They said he told them to draw what he sees." Father Marin stood, trembling. "There's something behind the walls. I've heard the knocking for weeks. Thought it was rats." The sheriff ordered his men to remove a section of plaster. Beneath it, they discovered another layer, an older wall, blackened with soot. Carved into it, in perfect script, were words burned into the wood. "He comes when they remember." As the deputies stared, a sound echoed through the orphanage, the creak of the front doors slowly opening on their own. A draft swept through the hall, scattering loose drawings across the floor. The children screamed. Pike raised his rifle, calling out, "Who's there?" A faint voice answered from the chapel. "Father Marin." They turned. The priest's face went white. "That's her," he whispered. "Emma." But when they entered the chapel, it was empty. Only the pulpit stood in the flickering light, and behind it, a new drawing had appeared on the wall, smeared in red. It showed a spiral descending beneath the floorboards. "The cellar," Sister Agnes breathed. There was no known cellar on the orphanage blueprints. But beneath the altar, behind a loose stone, they found an iron handle. Pike and his men pried it open. A narrow staircase led down into darkness. The air was damp, chokingly cold. Flashlights didn't exist in 1817, so they carried lanterns. The flames sputtered with every step. The stairs ended in a small stone chamber. The walls were lined with children's sketches, some dating decades earlier, each depicting the same faceless figure. In the center of the room stood a crude wooden table. On it lay a stack of charcoal drawings bound with string. Father Marin untied them. The first few were innocent: flowers, trees, the orphanage. But as he turned the pages, the images grew darker, children standing in circles, eyes missing, hands raised to a tall figure in a coat. And then, one final drawing. It showed the orphanage engulfed in fire just as before. But now, in the background, 3 adults stood burning too, Himself, Sister Agnes, and Sheriff Pike. Marin dropped the paper, whispering a prayer. "Dear God!" That's when the door above slammed shut. The lanterns flickered. Something began moving in the dark corner of the cellar, a scraping sound like a boot sliding across stone. Sister Agnes grabbed the priest's arm. "We have to go." Then a voice, deep and calm, filled the room. You opened it. The lantern light died. Pike fired his rifle blindly, the echo booming through the cellar. But when the smoke cleared, there was no one there. Only the drawings fluttering in the cold air, one by one lifting from the walls and falling like ash. When the men above finally pried open the trapdoor, they found the chamber empty. No Father Marin, no Sister Agnes. Only the stack of drawings, perfectly arranged on the table. The top one was new. It showed Sheriff Pike standing in the doorway, holding his rifle. Witness reports say he dropped dead seconds later. Lantern still burning beside him. The remaining children were evacuated by the end of that week. St. Dymphna's was sealed by the diocese and officially condemned. But decades later, when the building was converted into a parish school, workers claimed to hear faint scratching behind the plaster, as if something or someone was still drawing. Nearly 2 centuries later, the old orphanage stood hidden behind ivy and fog. Locals called it St. Dymphna's School. You said, "No right, Part 6, and Part 6 will be maximum 800," ChatGPT said. By the 1990s, St. Dymphna's had been reduced to a skeleton of its former self. The church bell was gone, the windows bricked over, the walls covered in ivy. Locals called it the Old Parish School, though few remembered or dared to mention what it really had been, an orphanage that closed after every child disappeared. Renovations began that summer. The new owners, a historical preservation group from Portland, planned to turn the site into a museum dedicated to early pioneer life. Among the volunteers was Lauren Gage, a 29-year-old art restorer with a fascination for lost Americana. On August 12th, she arrived with her team to clear debris from the old chapel. The place smelled of dust and old paint. She wore gloves, a mask, and headphones, listening to an old cassette labeled Field Recording St. Dymphna's Choir, 1912. The tape began with static. Then faintly, children's voices, singing Agnus Dei. At 2:47 p.m., Lauren uncovered a section of the chapel wall where plaster had fallen away. Beneath it, she found dozens of overlapping drawings, tiny, detailed maps made in charcoal. Each map ended at a spiral symbol. She called her supervisor. "You need to see this. It looks old." "Really old?" He shrugged it off. "Probably just old wallpaper. Document it and move on." But Lauren couldn't. That night she stayed late, tracing one of the spirals with her flashlight. Behind it, the plaster crumbled. A small gap revealed another surface, smooth, cold wood. She pried it open with her trowel and gasped. Behind the wall, perfectly preserved, hung hundreds of children's drawings, still bright after nearly 2 centuries. Every one of them showed the same thing, a faceless man in a long coat standing in the chapel doorway. Lauren stumbled back, heart pounding. Her cassette player clicked. The tape had stopped. Then, on its own, it began to rewind. The lights flickered. She whispered, "Is someone here?" The air shifted. A child's laugh echoed behind her. The cassette started playing again, but the choir was gone. Instead, a faint voice, distant, layered, spoke. "He comes when they remember." Lauren turned off the player. "Who said that?" Silence. Then, tap, tap, tap from beneath the chapel floor. She dropped to her knees, pressing her ear to the wood. The tapping grew faster, frantic, like fingers scratching from below. Panicked, she ran to the exit, but the door chain was already drawn tight. Her flashlight flickered and died. In total darkness, she fumbled for her phone, but the screen stayed black. Only the sound remained, the scratching, and then... "The dragging? Stop!" she cried. A soft whisper answered inches from her ear. "Draw what you see." The next morning, workers found her sitting on the chapel floor, eyes vacant, charcoal in her hand. On the wall before her, a new drawing. The orphanage, perfectly detailed, but burning. Lauren survived, though she never spoke again. Her sketches from that night were archived by the Oregon Historical Society. When examined under ultraviolet light, faint childlike handwriting appeared in the margins. We didn't leave. We finished it. In 2003, the building was demolished. But those who took part in the demolition, contractors, engineers, Even a local priest reported the same nightmare in the weeks after, a dark staircase, a voice calling their name, and a child's hand guiding them downward. No one ever found where those stairs led. Today, a memorial garden stands where St. Dymphna's once stood. Locals say sometimes, late at night, drawings appear on the walls of the visitor center, charcoal spirals that vanish by morning. Whether it's damp, dust, or something older, no one knows. But one plaque at the garden's entrance reads, "In memory of the lost children of St. Dymphna's, 1817, below the inscription, faintly etched into the stone by an unknown hand, are 4 words that no restorer can erase. He still draws here. The end.